Hi, this is Paranormal Encounters, and my name is Brenda McGee. If you have any activity, or if you have anything that you don't understand, or if you have questions about the paranormal, you can email me at paranormalencountertv9@gmail.com. And I'd like to introduce my guest today, Kira Stiles. Thank you, Kira, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Kira, we do know each other for quite a while. I know you're a medium, and I know that you're a paranormal investigator, and you also do writing about the paranormal and different things. So can you tell me what your first experience was in an investigation or anything like that?
Yes, it was quite an interesting way to start my life as an investigator, because it was actually my second investigation. One of my team members actually got possessed.
Oh, geez.
While we were on the investigation. It was, to this day, I'm not even sure exactly what happened, but I do know that it was dark then in the room. We were checking on each other, and we couldn't see each other, but we could hear each other. And we were checking on each other, and we got to this one guy in the group, and we called for him, but he didn't answer. And we knew something was wrong, so somebody turned on the lights. And I mean, I've heard so many things, and I have to be honest, I've been a skeptic most of my life. It's, paranormal ghosts, come on now, really, get real. But that night, when I looked at this man, and I saw him slither across the floor like a snake, like no human being could ever move in my life. And his eyes were orange. That was one thing I will never, ever forget. His eyes were orange. Because people have said to me, oh, yeah, he's got pink eye. No, listen to me. His eyes were orange. They were not pink. They were orange. And, I mean, at least it was a good thing at least we had somebody on site to help take care of it as far as demonologist goes. And, well, I guess you could call it an exorcism, because there was something that just did not belong inside this man. And like I said, he was slithering across the floor. His eyes were orange. He was hissing. He was spitting. And it was scary. And I mean, okay, like I said, other things that people have thrown in, maybe he had pink eye, maybe he was sick. No, this guy was perfectly fine when we were on our way there. He was perfectly fine when we were on our way home. But in this little while, about an hour and a half or so, that this went on, he was not him. He was somebody completely different, and it was scary. Now,
did that last a long time, or did it seem like it was forever because all of this was happening?
Of course, it did. And I mean, there was like so many things that I remember going through my mind, but at the same time, there was like so much of it that I just was so freaked out that it is. But I do remember thinking, especially with the orange eyes, I remember thinking to myself, don't look into his eyes. Don't look into his eyes. Don't look, because I didn't want it inside me.
Right.
I mean, like I said, it was only my second investigation, and here's this happening to like somebody I knew. And right. I mean, if he couldn't stop it, I was brand new at this. Well, what was I going to do to stop it?
That's a scary situation.
It was quite scary, but thankfully, like I said, everything worked out well. It went away finally, and he came back, and he was perfectly fine on the way home afterwards, and he's been perfectly fine since, more or less,
Yeah.
But
now, after that happened, did that make you think, is this something that I really want to still do? Because people don't realize that this is reality, that things like this do happen, and it is scary. And sometimes, it's happened to me when I've gone on investigations. I was, there was one episode that I had when I first started out also. And, I didn't expect them that they followed or anything like that. And I was like, do I really want to do this? So people really need to know this stuff isn't made up. It's not, it is kind of like the movies. They, of course, make it a little bit scarier than it can be.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Hollywood's Hollywood. They're going to go on anything they can, make it as scary as possible. But I mean, interestingly enough, even after that, even after seeing that happen, I was still skeptical.
Right.
It was still like, okay, well, that happened. I mean, in my own mind, like I said, seeing it happen, and all the times that people were like, oh, you know, he had pink eye or whatever, or he was sick or whatever, and I was able to turn around and say, no, this is what I saw. But my mind at the same time, I'm going, did I really, though? Was that real? It didn't happen to me. It happened to him.
Right.
Could there have been something that, you know, that happened that he did, or still, I was still skeptical. So yes, by all means, I was still okay.
And this was actually only the second time that you've gone with them, so you know them, but you really don't know them. So you could be like, you know, are they putting on a show for these people or anything like that? But
exactly.
Yeah, so it's hard to tell sometimes. So I get the skeptics. And you know something, until they have an experience, or till they talk with someone who's had an experience and they trust that person, or even just the evidence itself. I mean, you know, they have to go with what you say, and they can either believe it or not believe it.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of them, I mean, a lot of them, it's personal experience.
Yeah.
It has to be, it happened to you, where you can look back at it and say, well, I didn't fake it. You know, I didn't do this, and I didn't set up that, and this did. That just happened because of something that I can't explain.
Right. And I love it when, you know, people will say, oh, I've never experienced, like when you're around a bunch of people or something, and then they pull you to the side and say, oh, I didn't want them to know, but yeah, this happened to me and this happened to me, because it's almost like they don't want to be labeled as, you know, telling a story about something.
Crazy, more or less.
Crazy. You know, you're going to think I'm crazy, and I always say, no, I'm not.
Exactly, that's how you're going to think I'm crazy. No, I'm not, actually. You just don't know what I've seen, what I've been through. Oh, I know. Yeah.
Now, what was the most, I know that was scary for you for the first time. Was there anything that really shocked you that happened in an investigation, or that changed everything for you?
Actually, after a while, after a couple of years, it was the second time for me, but it turned out to be my turn. I got possessed.
Oh, jeez.
I was in the Primal House Hotel in Sauk Center, Minnesota. And that place is well known for its paranormal activity, but the basement has especially been kind of dark. There's always been things that people say, they go down there and they just feel like they need to get out of there, like there's something like that that's just dark and sinister down there.
Now, is there like a history of something that happened there, or is it just activity that they really can't tell?
The place burned down in, I believe it was 1901, if I remember correctly. And from what I understand, for some reason, there were quite a few people that were stuck in the basement and ended up dying in the fire.
Yeah.
So I think it had a lot to do with that. And of course, like I said, it's been up since 1901, well, before that. So, I mean, there's plenty of history stuck to it as far as guests and what could have happened, you know, just like regular staying there, you know, somebody could, because they had like this beautiful staircase, and I'm sure, you know, there could have been accidents down there or whatever, and stuff like that. So, I mean, there is a lot of history to it. But the basement is the darkest, I guess. Probably because, like I said, the people were trapped.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's usually thought, especially about paranormal activity, that the spirits or ghosts go to where they feel they had the most emotion attached to it.
Yep.
Whereas, you know, if you think about it, you're stuck in a fire in the basement, that's going to be pretty scary.
Right.
Also, you know, they're going to want to stay because they didn't understand what happened. One minute they were fine, next minute they're trapped in the basement burning to death.
And honestly, some of them don't even realize that they died in that fire.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, that's another thing. Some of them still try to wander around trying to figure out what happened, where they are, why their loved ones, you know, can't see them anymore, can't know that they're there. So that that night in the basement, I had gone down there, and there was a group of us. It was a little event that somebody local had put on, and I don't know, there was about maybe 10 or 15 of us, and I happened to be in the back of the group. And everybody else started to walk away, and I remember just being drawn over to a dark corner on the opposite direction. Like everybody started to go one way, I went the opposite way. And I remember standing there, and it was a weird feeling. It was, I can't even begin to describe, almost like when you sit on your foot for too long and you lose,
Oh,
you know,
yeah, the
a tingly
numbness.
feeling almost
Right.
like throughout my whole body. And I heard them, because the way the basement's set up, it's like set up in a big circle, and I heard everybody coming back around in the big circle. And we had been there a couple of days, and I met a few people, and we were chatting and everything, so a couple of voices I had recognized. So I heard them coming around the corner. I remember thinking to myself, I wanted to be me and say something sarcastic,
Right.
because that's how I am.
Gee, no.
Oh, well. They came around the corner, and the words came out of my mouth that were not mine. It was not my voice. It was not me saying it. And I suddenly realized that I was more or less trapped inside my body, and there was nothing I could do about it.
Oh, my gosh.
It was speaking to them. And like I said, I don't exactly remember what it said, because I remember being so scared, like, what do? I don't even know how to get out of this. So, I mean, I just like started to fight it. I started to, like, you know, think good thoughts, think angelic thoughts, God, Jesus, anything.
Right.
Anything that could try to scare this darkness away. And we fought back and forth. And I actually finally remember, I hit the floor. I more or less passed out, smacked my head on the concrete floor, had a big scratch up my arm. And it wasn't, and I couldn't process it. It was like, as soon as that happened, I jumped up, realized I had my body back, jumped up and ran around to everybody else to make sure everybody else was okay.
Right.
I mean, here I am, I got blood going down my arm.
And
I got
you're
a
worried about
bruise.
everybody
Yeah, and
else.
I'm worried about everybody else. They actually had to stop me from running around and bring me upstairs and sit me down, like, okay, you need to rest.
Right.
You need to get away from this. But it was like I said, it was like, I was inside my body and there was nothing I could do.
Now,
I mean,
could they tell that there was something wrong with you, or were they just speaking in your voice, like kind of tricking them?
yeah, it was like, I guess my tone of voice. It was,
Right.
but it was stuff that I would never say.
Right.
Wait a minute, he said something like, "Oh, you're back," or something like it, but it was my voice.
Right.
So, and they didn't, like I said, we were there for the weekend, so I didn't really know them that well. So they wouldn't know how sarcastic I was, or how much I'd be, you know, waiting to say something sarcastic when they came around the corner.
Right.
They were just like, they went along with it until I think they realized that I was trying to fight it, because I was going back and forth, like, and I think I was moving around a little bit the best I could, because I had nothing.
That's crazy.
I had no control over my thought. Well, I did over my thought, but I had no control over my voice. I had no control of my body. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything.
Now, but you could tell exactly what was going on around you.
Oh, yes.
So you weren't like totally out of it or anything like that.
Other than that, it was like I was there. I was fully aware of what was going on, but it was just like I had no control. I couldn't do anything. It was almost like being wide awake, standing up, or being in a coma.
Now, let me ask you something, because I know that people who have experienced things like that said that they were totally exhausted. It had drained every piece of energy out of them. Did you feel that way, or did you feel energized actually?
Actually, after I have things happen, well, not so much that, obviously, because that was one big thing. But when I deal with the paranormal afterwards, I do feel energized, like almost to the point of shaking. Like
I feel the same way. It's adrenaline.
yeah,
Adrenaline
exactly. And it took a while for somebody actually brought me over a piece of coal so I could try to ground myself.
Oh wow!
Because I was shaking so bad I could barely even talk.
Was your recorder running?
Yeah. Was it? I think it was, actually. Yes, I think it was.
We always forget that when things are happening.
Oh, we
do.
do.
Is the recorder on? Is the film? Did we get that on tape?
Do we have that on tape? I'm not sure.
Did we get that evidence? So you stayed there for the weekend. Was that like the most intense thing that you experienced? Or?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, there was like, you know, other stuff. The other stuff in the rest of the hotel was so much lighter, like children playing and you know, family-like atmosphere, even with the ghosts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but that was definitely the most intense thing that I experienced that weekend.
Now, I remember reading one of your stories that I absolutely thought was amazing. And I know it was life-changing for you also. And I think it was the Slater Mill.
Yes.
Slater Mill story that you wrote about.
Another time I was possessed.
Yeah, but I remember you talking to me about that. Was it that one? I think it was that one where you had that encounter with that little girl.
With a little girl, yes. I had started out that night. Slater Mill, the way it was set up, it's set up in a couple of different areas. Like the Slater Mill itself, right next door is Wilkinson Mill, And downstairs from Wilkinson Mill is the wheel room that they used for electricity and in that back in the day, because those were built in the late 1700s, 1780s, I believe. I don't remember off the top of my head. But and there's also a house on the grounds that belonged to a Mr. Brown, who was instrumental in helping both Mr. Slater and Mr. Wilkinson build their mills.
Right.
So they brought his house down to keep, the whole little historic area. And both mills are said to be haunted by the past, obviously the past, people of the past. Back in those days, child labor was a big thing.
Right.
And they started as early as maybe 3 years old, going around and working in the mills. And a lot of it was, they were the only ones small enough to help with the machines to get underneath, because things would get tangled up. So they'd get underneath and untangle it. But the thing was, they didn't shut off the machines. So the children only had a certain amount of time to get back out, and a lot of them didn't make it.
Right.
Some of them were maimed, and some of them were killed. And I went into Slater Mill. That was the first part I was in. And I was wandering around, and I came to the middle of the mill where they had cut out a part of the floor. They were just like trying to like show the people what was downstairs, what was underneath the floor, as far as, because they had a wheel room in there too, as far as, this is how we had electricity going and everything else. But as I neared this hole in the floor, I mean, I could only describe it. It was like a cartoon.
Yeah.
The floor started swirling, almost like a wooden whirlpool. That's all I can describe. And I felt like I was just being sucked into that energy field.
Wow.
And the more I tried to fight it, the more it sucked me in. And by the time I got out of there, I was both shaking, as far as the amount of energy, and covered with sweat. So the weird thing was, though, I mean, this was also young in my paranormal investigation career. I had no idea anything was wrong.
Right.
I mean, I was processing it all in my head. Okay, this is going on, but it still wasn't clicking that, okay, this is wrong. This should not be happening right now.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, at one point I felt a burning sensation on my back, which they say might be, scratches or something. And I had known that, so I got scared. So I went up in the bathroom. I don't remember going into the bathroom. I remember standing where I was, and then I remember standing in the bathroom. I don't remember the time in between.
Wow.
And I was, like I said, it was on my back, so I was like trying to pull my shirt up and look at it. I'm trying to look at myself in the mirror, and there was like a red screen over it, like lights and everything over everything.
Wow.
And it's still not processing in my head that something was wrong. So by the time I got to the Brown house, the house that was owned by Mr. Brown, his house is said to be haunted by a little girl. The staff at the Slater Mill historic site is named Becca.
Oh.
I think one other group or something had picked up that name, so that they stuck with it. So by the time I got there that night, I was so spent and tired, and just like so much energy had coursed through me, there was almost nothing left.
Right.
I mean, I was almost surprised I was walking. And we got in there, and the guide was talking about, and he was talking about Becca, and he was saying, if you put your hand out, it's possible that she might take it. So I'd lagged behind her. I was behind everybody. I was like kind of standing up against the wall, scrunched down a little bit, because I just had it. And I had my head in my hands doing one of these, well, not even looking up. I had my eyes closed, but I had my hand out like this. Right. The next thing I knew, I could feel tiny little fingers wrapping around just these two fingers. And there were no children there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. It was,
right.
a group of people. There were no children
right.
around.
Yeah.
And I looked up, and there was nobody there in front of me, but I could still feel the fingers around mine, and they were icy, icy cold. And before I could even open my mouth to say anything, another woman that was with us, she was actually a medium, she said, she's here, and she's afraid of all these people. And I could almost feel her at that point. She had let go of my hand and got behind me, like she was hiding, like she was like, oh, these people are scaring me, let me hide behind my mom.
Right.
And she chose me at that moment to protect her, which was just like, I mean, after the entire night of all the bad stuff that had happened, this moment just changed everything, because it was like this little girl, because I'm a mother myself,
Right.
this little girl was searching for somebody to protect her and to
Right.
keep her safe, and she came to me. And I felt like that, wow,
Yeah.
that I needed to do so. I needed to protect her. So I kept it on the down low a little bit. I didn't like really tell anybody at first, because I didn't want to scare her.
Right.
Because I knew that's what she just wanted to be protected. And that in itself was just like, that was awesome.
Yeah, people don't realize. I mean, it's very sad when you know that there's children that are still there.
Oh, for sure.
And things like that. And I know on some of our investigations we've had that, and that, we do try to cross as many as we can that wants to be crossed. But I remember you writing that story, and I was at the edge of my seat just with everything that you were writing.
It was amazing. And the next time actually that I went walked into the Brown house, I heard a little voice say, hello.
They don't forget.
And like I said, there were no children. There was no children there with us. So I mean, it was a child's voice, and and I heard it with my own ears. So it wasn't even like it was on a recording.
Right.
Because I was like, did anybody else hear that? I was the only
Well,
one.
at least you said it, because some people will be like, I don't know if I heard anything.
Hear what?
Yeah, I heard something. Now, I know you've been on many different ones. I know you've traveled quite a ways, too. Is there a favorite that you've had? Like, is there a place that you would investigate more than once, numerous times, because you just like to be in that space? Because I know you've been to the Lizzie Borden house.
Oddly enough, I was just about to say that's one I seem to be drawn to.
Yeah, because I remember you did write a story on.
Yes,
yeah,
I did.
You did. I remember reading that. But is it something, do you think that somebody's reaching out to you, or, you know what I mean? Because, I know that when I investigate places, sometimes I'll start dreaming about it afterwards also. So it's almost like they want you to come back. So you almost wonder, like, why is that?
I think something, like you said, somebody or something is trying to reach out to me. I mean, there's of course a lot of sinister darkness associated with that house. There was a double axe murder there,
Right.
And before that, 50 years before that, there was 3 more murders, murder-suicide actually. So I mean, there's a lot of darkness associated with that house, and yes, I can feel it when I go in there. But there's also many times that I feel safe.
Yeah.
Like somebody wants me there and somebody's watching over me.
What did you think of the reenactment, that movie that they did? I wasn't too thrilled with that.
It took me a while to warm up to it, but I mean, I've done a lot of research on the history and stuff, so I mean, it's hard to overlook some of the things like Hollywood. Hey,
Yeah,
Hollywood's
well, they
around
gotta,
with it for sure.
they can't do it all the right way, because they still say they never really figured out that story.
And they didn't. It's still unsolved. They don't know who killed them. Maybe it was Lizzie, maybe it wasn't.
Right.
Nobody knows.
Right. And when was the first time? Now, you've done it numerous times, but how was your first experience there?
Oh, my first experience, boy, oh boy. That was the first investigation, I think, where I got a chock full of EVP on my recorder, which electronic voice phenomenon. But there was one of them in particular that still kind of sends a chill through me to this day. When we pulled up to the house that I'd gone in with my husband, and we got up to the house, and I pulled up outside, turned off the car, I looked at him and said, okay, let's do this. 4 hours later, I picked up a recording in the basement that oddly enough sounds exactly like me saying, let's do this. Whispering to me. So that, that was a little bit bone-chilling to actually, because like I said, it sounds just like me.
Yeah.
Actually, 4 hours later. So it wasn't like I recorded it in the car. It was 4 hours later this pops up.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a little bit bone-chilling, but at the same time, it was like, wow, just wow, that I could even pick that up, that I even heard that.
My first experience there was actually a tour, but then I actually investigated. And I know you have so many different stories, but unfortunately, we're going to have to start wrapping up. But I'd love to have you back.
Sounds good.
And if anybody wants to get in touch with Kira or has any questions, you can email me at paranormalencounterstv9@gmail.com. And thank you, Kira, so much for being here with me.
Thank you again for having me. I really had a great time.